process of human mapping is one of the most powerful processes that you can do to prepare for healing, not so much the psyche, but repairing and healing the symmetry of the ego such that the relationship with the psyche is one of wholeness, is one of ease. So let's look at some of the different things we can do with mapping. So one of the things that we can do is make a history in 10-year segments. You can do it in 7 years if you prefer, but 7 or 10-year segments, in which you outline the most significant events of each period. Now, significance can be measured and should be measured in two different ways. The events that elicited the strongest feelings, positively or negatively, and the events that were the most seminal or pivotal. So, for example, in my 3rd grade, my teacher died in a car accident. And she was the only woman in my life up to that point that I'd been able to have a secure relationship with. So it's a pivotal moment towards dissociation. I remember I couldn't even feel anything when I went to her funeral. There was a kind of a giddy sense of dissociation. So the events that were seminal or pivotal, seminal giving birth to something, pivot, something was going somewhere and it changed. The most intense positive or negative emotions. So you want to create this life history of significance. Significance in the external sense and significance in the emotional sense. You know, some of your strongest feelings. You looked over and your father was looking at you in a certain way when you were brushing your teeth, and that was the moment you knew you would never be accepted the way you were. It's the moment you process and register something that is the pivotal moment. This is your first map. Now, having created this map, and it's a big and powerful undertaking that 90% of the planet, for some strange and bizarre reason, is never going to do. Once you've completed that undertaking, you now want to look at the patterns. And what you're looking for in terms of healing your relationship with the psyche, with yourself, is you're looking for a direction, a pattern. For example, one pattern that I find over and over again in my relationship with U.S. culture, be it parentally, at school, in government, is the patterned message, do not feel what you feel. Do not acknowledge your feelings. Do not honor the feelings that you don't feel and don't acknowledge. And feelings, by the way, are no big deal. It's a strange pattern to a species where a third of their whole experience is emotion. One could argue the most important third, if you think of the fact that if you deleted all human feeling and left your conscious mind in control of the situation, you would die very quickly. It's similar to the phenomena that parents have when they have children who are born without the ability to feel pain. They're not alarmed when they see blood rushing out. They don't learn regulation in their body. So these children will go out and crack their head open if you leave them alone for a few minutes. And they'll just sit there and watch themselves bleed to death because there's no pain to motivate them. If you imagine no emotion, no fear, no joy, no hope, no love, no courage, nothing, what's going to get you out of bed? You wipe that off and you don't have a species. And yet, for some strange reason, we don't learn to honor our feelings by letting them teach us. So that's what we're wanting to look at in this history as patterns. Message patterns, behavior patterns, and asymmetrical patterns. An asymmetrical pattern might be it's okay for adults to lie, but it's not okay for children to lie. Or it's okay for people who are rich to have affairs or to break the law, but it's not okay for people who don't have money. Or it's okay for women to play with children, but it's not okay for men. What's the pattern? You want to look at these patterns carefully and make a list of as many patterns as you can see. And you want to look for the asymmetry in the pattern. For example, women get to go up and play with the innocence that is children. And they are greeted, welcomed, and smiled at. But I, as a man in America, cannot do that. There's an anxiety. Now, as I go over to Thailand, I can do that. I can play with a stranger's child for an hour, and I'm viewed as intelligent for obviously valuing children. In the US, I have 10 seconds in a park or wandering around. After that, it's the pedophile threshold. The more interest, empathy, care, or responsiveness that I show to a child, the more suspicious I am, as opposed to the more healthy I am. So there's an asymmetry there between men and women. Now, once we acknowledge and notice these patterns, the dis-ease will be correlated with the asymmetry. The dis-ease will be correlated with the asymmetry. You've gone to school for 18 years, you've learned all about your mind, you've learned nothing about your heart. That's an asymmetry. You're equal parts, heart, mind, and body. If you don't think so, go and be a vegetable for 10 years with no feeling and no mind and see how important your body is. If you don't think so, shut off all emotions and have no meaning. If you don't think so, lose consciousness and have no control over your emotions or your body with your thoughts. They're each equally important. So this is your first map, and it's a big one. It's a really big one. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour at a time. Sit down and do a year. Sit down and do a year. Do each wave from 0 to the present age. And I say do a year because you can often do that. 0 to 1, nada. 2 to 3, memories of this, feelings of this. 3 to 4, nothing comes up that I remember. You work through it in waves until you see the pattern. For this next exercise in the process of mapping, you want to map out your heart. So let's step back a little bit. the heart is a scientific instrument that is capable of feeling every single human emotion. That's what an instrument does. It's very much like a set of eyes. You don't have the ability to look through a normal, healthy set of eyes and not see red. You don't have the ability to not see blue. You see whatever is there to see, and the heart is very similar. You don't have the ability to not feel hatred, or to not feel rage, or to not feel whatever. Whatever you see is what you will read. Now, the difference between the heart and the set of physical eyes is you do have some control over your attention. So here's what I mean. Typical person, they see a baby strapped down on a railroad track. Train's coming, baby's screaming. Typical person is going to feel panic and helpless and desperation and can I get these knots undone and oh my gosh, what's this happening? You know, that's normal because what the human heart is processing is a desperate situation for that baby. It's processing a level of sadistic cruelty in the community because obviously if a baby is strapped onto a rail, it means someone did it. And for someone to have done it, it means they had to be induced into a sociopathic state. And for someone to be induced and to be an adult or big enough to manage tying a baby down, they had to be in a sociopathic state for some time, which is speaking a lot about the culture, because it means that the culture can create people in a sociopathic state and then leave them there for considerable time. So all of that is extrapolated from seeing a baby tied on to a railroad track with a train coming. So your feelings are going to be intense with grief and sadness and helplessness and the whole thing. And it could be that you see you are not going to be there for that baby and you're going to feel grief and you're going to feel helpless. Now, that's what the scientific reading of the human heart is going to produce. If you are a human being in an empathic state, you have not been dissociated from your emotions, that's what that situation produces. It's very much like a thermostat. If it's 58 degrees out there, the thermostat produces a mercury reading that corresponds to 58 degrees. It's not like the mercury gets to read 40 below zero when the temperature is 58 degrees. It reads what's there. But there's one difference between the thermostat and the human being. The mercury is always in the present. But the human being can be in the past or in the future or in their imagination. So a human being can look at the baby about to be run over by a train and can turn their attention to the fact that they'll be late for a job interview. And then can turn their attention to, I hope nobody found out that I drove by a baby. A human being can do that and juggle more complex, meaning they create the reality in their mind. And in creating the reality in their mind, they can have multiple realities producing multiple feelings almost simultaneously. It's not simultaneous. They think of the job interview, maybe they feel anxiety and a focus on being confident. They think of the baby and they feel helpless and scared. They think of their friends and they feel guilty, and they think of being able to avoid being known as someone that would turn away from a baby, and they feel like, yeah, I can pull that one off. I feel confident. And so they've got all four of those going on maybe in 3 to 5 seconds. And out of that, they make a decision. And this isn't just made up. There's a video of a car driving over an infant in China and people stepping over the dead infant. Of course, it became international only because it was on film. And since it was on film, the film created an entirely different emotional relationship with reality than the actual reality itself. Because are you one of those people who would just walk over a baby? Well, you may be, but are you one of the people who wants to be known as I'm the kind of person who'd walk over a baby? Not so much. And so this is if we understand that the human heart is a scientific instrument that processes data from the reality, that is a mixture of that data and a mixture at any given point with data in the future, data in the past, etc. So if we understand this, then what we want to first look at is there any points in the scientific instrument called the human heart where we have been blocked access? Now, this doesn't mean that the heart doesn't read it. But imagine you lived in a family where there was some big taboo reason not to acknowledge that the temperature was below 32 degrees. Let's say you have one of those arrogant patriarchs in your family that predicted the weather is not going to freeze and you own an orange grove. Well, that's a little bit of bravado to combat the helplessness of the fact that, frankly, you don't control the weather. So you go out to look at the thermometer and it's 27 degrees. Dad was wrong. You could lose a lot of family income. But your mother pulls you aside and says, we don't want information right now. It's not safe for you and for me to tell the truth about the temperature. Dad's going to have to work out his feelings on his own. Don't talk about this data. Well, families all over the country deal with these secret areas. We don't talk about Uncle Kenny. And we don't talk about why we don't talk about Uncle Kenny. We don't talk about what Uncle Kenny did. We don't talk about the fact that we don't talk about him. The whole thing is just off. Well, it's not that you don't have feelings about all that. It's just they're forbidden to be expressed. Well, the human heart, just like a thermometer, is intended to give you scientific information. If you feel helpless, the information is there's something wrong in the environment that is inducing helplessness. Well, why is this useful? Well, maybe we need more babysitters in the village. Maybe we need to engage the people we've marginalized, traumatized, and scapegoated into such a point where we've induced a sociopathic state and then left them there. We do that in this culture. We create and abuse people. We marginalize and scapegoat them. And then we just leave them there in miserable states and avoid them. Everyone knows they're there. Don't talk to so-and-so. Don't do this. Don't go down that road at this time of night. But nobody makes it their business to engage them. Why not? Well, one big reason is certain things we just don't talk about. A child says, what's happening with that guy over there? And the mother says, don't talk about that. Well, this is kind of strange. How's the kid to prepare and deal with reality if there's whole sections of data and whole sections of feelings where you just can't talk about it? It's the problem with taboos. So what we're looking for here that's the most dangerous thing. Pockets of reality that have gone unintegrated and unprocessed because you never dealt with them, because they couldn't be talked about, because you were protecting a certain person from their feelings that they were masking with misinformation. If Dad really can't deal with the orange freeze, he may need to make a lie up that it never froze, that it was just hard luck. Now, how someone can pull that off in their mind is hard to say. But we all know people who do it just fine. And so obviously the brain is capable of lying and finding some comfort in lying even when they know they're lying, and even when they know that you know that they're lying. And even when you know that they know that you know that they're lying, they can pull it off. But if you say just one word, hey, we all know you're lying. What's up? They'll explode because they can't process helplessness, let's say. It wasn't allowed in their family. Now you've just induced them out of fantasy into a reality in which helplessness would be relevant. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? These are the things that you're trying to unearth in this map of emotions. So you want to find the taboos, the bits of reality you couldn't talk about, you couldn't think about, that were obvious but that never got spoken. And you want to find the map in your emotions that correspond with that data. And you want to break the taboo, tear up the contract of silence, and you want to open up the box and say, oh, okay, well, what happened there was I think I had a father who couldn't deal with a feeling of helplessness, and he couldn't deal with what to do if we were poor, and so he just had to invent a lie that it couldn't happen. And then when it did happen, he had to invent a lie that it wasn't happening. And because he was so busy living in that lie, we lost everything. Because if he stopped spending money, he'd have to acknowledge that something was wrong. So he couldn't stop spending money because everything was definitely going to be fine, and he would spend even more money to prove that he believed what he knew was wrong until the debt collectors came and took it all. And then he had nothing and still couldn't face the truth because he didn't know how to deal with it in a culture that denies so much of its shadow, so much of its feelings, and certainly denies emotional literacy. So you're looking for a map that you can say, oh, okay, that's what was going on there. I get it. I know why he lied. I see people around me right now that would lie the same way. I see the danger in lying. I see the awkwardness of telling the truth in this culture, and here's my plan around what to do about that, and it's still okay. When you can break through that contract and speak the truth, you have an incredible advantage over the typical human being who's still locked in their taboo. We just don't say this. Now, these lies can be all kinds of things. Everything's fine. That's a lie. I like it when you rumple my hair, but you hate it. I like making you look good and making myself look stupid, except I hated that, and I hated you for making me do that. You're unwrapping the layers of deception that allowed incompetent adults in your reality to navigate around without dealing with the truths and the feelings they didn't know how to deal with, in a culture that will send you all the way through college without a single hour of scientific emotional literacy. Well, it's no wonder. A few decades ago, you'd be shamed for going to therapy. So what exactly were your parents going to do when they felt helpless and small? Go and feel even more dumb for going to therapy? So you want to unearth this. And what you want to get to is a point where you can feel every single feeling with a range of intensity. Because what we're doing in these taboo points is we're dissociating. We're dissociating from the realities that are taboo. We're saying, my mom can't deal with intense anger. She freaks out, she breaks down, she bursts into tears, she has a panic attack, and she's just done another fucking thing that's made me intensely angry. But it's not okay to deal with that reality. Well, who knows why exactly that's your mother's disease. But as you approach, you say, Mom, well, it was kind of irritating when you did this. So that's a lie to protect yourself from the overwhelm and horror of your mother falling apart because of your feelings and revealing to you in no uncertain terms that she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. And you're on your own at 8 years old with a grown-up child who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, and you can't deal with that reality. And so you start lying, saying, I'm kind of irritated. Would you mind ever so much? No, it's no trouble whatsoever. To protect the lie. Well, if this lie, and this rule of not being intensely angry, let's say, becomes hardwired and emerges at a young age. Let's say you're 2 years old when you first express anger and you watch your mother go white as a sheet. And she starts sobbing. And it happens again and again. And you just, before you even have language, you just shut that anger off because you don't want to kill your mother who's giving you milk. Okay. Well, you're going to have to face the terror and the shock and the confusion of that inner 2-year-old who couldn't deal with an incompetent mother at that age. And you're going to have to be there with that 2-year-old in all that uncertainty and overwhelm and say, it's okay. I can deal with your anger now. And you're right. It was fucking infuriating to have her do this over and over and over and over again in a way that caused an endless amount of harm for no good reason. Absolutely enraging. But you never had the safety to feel it. You never had the safety to express it. your body starts shaking as if the entire world is going to end, because that's what was going to happen when you were 2 years old if you realized you were being raised by an imbecile. So you need to map out these stuck points. And so your trick, because of course you have no clue in this culture of emotional illiteracy what your feelings really are. So here's the way to work with it. Your feelings are the entire spectrum of human emotion. Hatred, despair, anger, grief, panic, confusion, loneliness, terror, joy, excitement, passion, energy, love, lust, curiosity, cruelty, the whole range of emotion. That's what this heart is capable of feeling, and that's what every single heart registers in the process of growing up. Sublime exaltation, beauty, transcendence, smallness, fear, and of course the environment. When the environment is constantly sending you, the same old miserable message, one of the biggest confusions we can make is that that's me. I am the one who feels miserable. That's when a temperature reading becomes an identity. It works like this, okay. You're a thermometer. Every time you look at the thermometer, it's 40 below zero. Now, the thermometer could be reading 75, sunny skies, but it's never in that temperature range. You're near the North Pole. It's the same goddamn temperature every single day. So you stop saying, I am the one capable of experiencing every single temperature. I am who I am, and it's just as long as I'm in the North Pole, I'm 40 degrees below zero, and I'm still 40 degrees. Then it becomes a confusion, and we identify with the predominant state. I am the instrument that is 40 degrees below zero. Now then, this becomes problematic when, as an adult, you move into warmer climates. Okay, so now the temperature is 72 degrees, and it's like, wait a minute. I'm not 72 degrees. I'm the one who's 42 degrees below zero. It's like, no. You are the one who has a response to their environment, who's been in a 40 degree below zero environment for more than a decade. And nobody bothered to explain that to you. In fact, in most cases, if you read the thermometer accurately and it's a negative temperature, your parents blame you for having the reading. It'd be as if the farmer goes out to the thermometer and says, I don't like that. I want 65 degrees tonight. You're at 28. You're going to freeze my field. The thermometer is not going to freeze your fields. It's giving you a reading. Now, an idiot would attack the thermometer, break it with a hammer, shout at it, come on, give me a better reading. And this is what a child can do. You see, thank goodness, we're not quite that crazy most of the time to shout at a thermometer. But we shout at our children all the time. Come on, how dare you say you're miserable? How dare you? What the fuck? I gave you some pasta and now you're sulking? Do you want me to throw you out of the house? I asked how you're feeling, and you are going to tell me that you're happy and I'm a great parent. Okay, let's see. Obviously, this doesn't help my feelings any. Higher anxiety, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But I'm with an idiot. They don't actually want to know what I'm feeling and why. If I tell them, I'll be punished. They do have the ability to throw me out of the house, and I don't want that. Okay, so what do I have to lie about what's going on here in order to stop being more abused than I'm already being. Okay, you're a great parent. I'm sorry I had the audacity to complain about the fact that you didn't take me to the park when you said you would. I mean, who am I to point out the truth? I'm sorry about this, this, and this, and you're right. I'm happy. I'm happy. It's meaningless. It's a lie. We look inside, we get the reading, and then we lie to avoid being punished. Well, pretty soon we're believing our own lies because we're being rewarded for doing so. Now we don't have a clue what we feel. So this thing was we stopped doing this so our parents wouldn't. Now we've got a completely cross-wired map of our emotions. So now we don't know what we want. Now we don't know how to be healthy. And that's what this is about. So you want to map through your childhood, and you want to find the full spectrum of emotion: hate, joy, wanting to have revenge, coldness, numbness, loneliness, pain at 5, pain at 10, meaning 10 out of 10 emotional, 100% pain, different kinds. You want to be able to move through these like a painter with color. Yeah, every single time. And an actor will do a good job at this. A method actor will do a good job at this. They need to experience extensive grief. They know there's something in their life that brought them extensive grief, so they turn their attention there. They feel the extensive grief, and then they act out the scene in that intensive grief, and it's an authentic performance. So if you are an actor, what you're trying to do is locate in this point where you can't go. Number one. And number two, relying on the map you just made of your life, why can't you go there? And number three, what help do you need? From a therapist, from friends, from meditation, from any deity that you bow to and honor? What help do you need to transcend that abusive pattern that walls you off from your own feelings and gives you access to the abundance of who you are and the abundance of what you feel? One of the hardest things in the next challenge is to create a mental map. Now, we'll kind of explore this together because it's the most complex. If you think of human relationships, just about everyone likes touch. It's not too hard if you close your eyes and start touching people. Just about anyone who touches you in the pressure and the frequency that you like, it's going to feel great. Emotions, who doesn't like being around smiles and happy people? It's not too difficult to connect. But you get to the mind, and suddenly you've got no two people are even remotely the same. You can find someone who likes your favorite movie, but they probably don't like your favorite politician, or vice versa, or they're Catholic and you're Jewish or Muslim. The beliefs are the hardest things to synchronize because they're the most complex. Beliefs, thoughts, paradigms. And so making a map is complicated, and it's important as part of this mapping process. Now, the beliefs are not the things that you say you believe, they're the things you act out of. For example, you get up, and what do you do? What you do has a lot to do with what you believe is important. It may or may not have much to do with what you say you believe is important, but we pray with our behavior. What we do is how we pray. So, what might a mental map look like? Well, if we take a list of the things that we do for a week, so make a list of the things that we do for a week, and look at how many of, look at how many of them you would say are based on freedom and discretionary time versus what you consider to be an obligation. That would be one thing. And look at what you do and what you don't do. And then understand that there's a reason behind everything you do and you don't do. There are multiple reasons. It's a long equation. The equation might read, I'm afraid of being a loser, so I get out of bed, but then I resent getting out of bed out of fear, so I'm mildly, covertly hostile, then I do this, and there's an equation. And the equation might be, I'm really excited about this, but I'm too afraid of rejection because I believe that I'm not as good as so-and-so, or I believe I am, but I still feel hurt and humiliated when I encounter this, so I don't fight it. Or there's a belief, a series of beliefs. And so if you will look at your behavior for a week, you will see what you worship, what you value, what you don't value. And in action, we're not looking at the totality of value. I mean, everyone may value a good relationship. But in order for you to take a single step towards a good relationship, you actually have to value it more than any other thing if that single step takes you outside your normal orbit. Meaning, if we can go anywhere, but at any moment we can only go in one place, we can only do one thing. In order for us to do one thing, in that moment we have to value that one thing more than we value doing any other thing, because that's the nature of the precision of time, is that we do not have the ability in a physical body to be in Paris and be in New York at the same time. Now, we have the ability to fly back and forth, but to fly from New York to Paris suggests the belief that for whatever variety of reasons, being in Paris is better for us, or we don't do it, and vice versa. And so we can understand our mental map by breaking down what we used as a rationale to do and not do the variety of things that we did that week. So this is a good way to dig into the fact that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, many of them contradictory. So this is one slice of the mental map. How do we pray with our bodies? And what's the code beneath that? Another map is, what are the core messages from our family and culture that are reverberating unconsciously and loudly within our system? Now, they may be very similar. In the United States in particular, your work is almost without question your number one prayer. Now, you may talk with people working 80 hours a week, and they say they're working 80 hours a week for their family. But you give them the chance, let's say they're, someone working 80 hours a week, making 200 grand. You give them the chance to make 100 grand and spend time with their family, they won't do it. So how many kids wish that their dad made an extra $100,000? How many kids wish their dad spent a little bit more time with them? So you realize there's a little dishonesty there. And by and large, the way that we pray is what we value. Now, we may believe, taking on the cultural wound, we may believe, particularly as a man, that our money is more valuable than our presence. Well, if you believe that, then it makes sense to work 80 hours for your family. It's not true. If you look at the data, kids miss their dads, they don't miss an extra $100,000. But if you believe that, it would be out of the question to quit the job and start a small business with your family that made a third as much money, but that kept you together as a family unit. And you say, oh, I couldn't afford the house. Okay, well then it would be inconceivable to sell the house, move to, perhaps an impoverished area of the world and the country and do online work where you could be with your family 8 hours a day and do 3 or 4 hours of online work, 10, 20, 30 bucks an hour, and you could pay for the lifestyle. It'd be inconceivable because money is more important than your presence as a fundamental belief, which ties into chauvinism, the belief that presence, a feminine quality, is not as valuable as production, a masculine quality, an object. So you can start to see how these beliefs piece together. And what you want to do is you want to have some sense of the machine that is your beliefs and your thoughts and how they fit together like cogs in a wheel to create your life within the probability field of the world around you. A breakdown of your week, a breakdown of your core thoughts, the core messages that you receive as a culture and how much those messages run our lives. So this is a good month's project, a good week to 6 weeks project. And you can do it in a week. Spend 2-3 hours a day jotting this down, exploring, etc. Or you can do it in bits and pieces, 10 to 20 minutes at a time over a course of a month, breaking down the day, looking at the messages. So what messages did I receive from my culture? What messages did I receive from my family? Who are my role models and what messages do I receive from them? Am I anywhere in here? What are my values? And finally, this breakdown of the week and the series of motivations. Now, it's very important to do shadow work leading up into this, because there's always a positive reason that we do something, and there is always a negative reason. And it's important to understand that nothing happens without the partnering of those two parts. You decide you're going to tell your best friend's girlfriend that your best friend is having an affair because you want to be honest. So that's the positive part, because you care about your best friend's girlfriend, because you don't think it's good for your best friend to be fucking up his relationship. Okay, so you want to be honest, you want to respect, da-da-da-da-da. But if you look closely in the shadow agenda, there's also going to be some part of you pissed off that he's getting away with it. Some part of you that enjoys the power of being able to shake up someone else's life. Some part of you that pissed off at your best friend for not giving you as much attention recently, and, or did this or that, lied to you 3 years ago and never really apologized. And so now's your chance to look lofty and noble and, give them a little punch in the chest. Because we are a complex series of personas, and that includes parts of us that feel very small and powerless, and that includes parts of us that feel hurt, and that includes parts of us that feel angry, and parts of us that feel the full range of emotions. Each of those parts play a role in the decisions that we make. So, in that sense, it's valuable to see how those parts come together, because if you look at the dark and the light, the small and the big, the old and the young, you can see how everything that we do is this partnering with these two parts. Otherwise, generally, it doesn't happen. And so that this is part of how reality turns. It's the same with politicians. They don't usually say, I'm going to pass this environmental bill because, my partner on the other side of the aisle knows that I'm having an affair and he's blackmailing me. If I don't do this, I'm going to talk to your wife and da-da-da-da-da, and so I'm going to pass this environmental bill. No, good part of you wants to pass the bill. You're a politician. Shadow part doesn't want to deal with their shit. So together they make an alliance and they pass the bill. So this is inventory. Shadow inventory, thought inventory, belief inventory. And it's hard fucking work to take this inventory. It takes time and discipline. And you know what? You're worth it. But there's a big voice inside all of us that says we're not. Otherwise, this inventory would have been taken a long time ago. What's 10 hours of time to actually know who you are, to have someone care about you enough to spend 10 measly fucking hours learning who you are and why you do what you do? Because if you don't think you're worth 10 hours, who the hell else is? You've got to take a stand for your value and your dignity before you can take a stand for any other person. So you can go an entire lifetime in this culture without a single person taking 10 hours to learn the codes that create your life. But you don't have to wait for someone else to do it. And if you show up and take 10 or 20 hours to do this inventory on a yearly basis, on a 3-yearly basis, you're saying to who you are and you're saying to the field, my life matters. I matter. What I can create with my life matters. And so I am going to value that enough to take this time. And I congratulate you for it. Okay, this map takes much less time, but it is an important map. Basically, in the ecosphere that is heart, mind, and body, they are all connected in the body. There is no thought that you can think that doesn't change your body. Just connect a bunch of mind mapping sensors and think different thoughts, and you will see that every thought you think changes your body. Just start be sitting there meditating and start pouring sugar into your body, start pouring LSD into your body, start pouring milk into your body, start pouring honey into your body. Whatever you pour into your body is going to affect your mind. It's going to affect what you think. And whatever you think and whatever you feel differently in your body, every emotion that we have is generated in the field that is the human heart, in the instrument that is the human heart. When you smoke, it changes the way you feel. Why else would you stick dirty chemicals in your mouth and inhale smoke? It doesn't taste good. It changes your body, and that changes the way you feel. So it's worth getting lung cancer if you can change the way you feel in a way that makes you feel better. The point is, there's no real separation. You kill this body, suddenly the thoughts and the feelings that are locked in this body don't exist anymore. Consciousness may exist, but the thoughts and the feelings through the lens of this body do not. Now, once we understand that the heart, mind, and body are intimately and inextricably connected, you cannot get depression without the cooperation of your feelings and your thoughts, and you cannot get depression without the cooperation of your body. And you think you're depressed, you inject a little cocaine. You haven't changed your thoughts and feelings, you've changed your body. Suddenly, not so much. Now, if we understand that there is a connection between these two, one of the things that happens is that the body stores what overloads the conscious mind. So a huge grief comes in and you're in a business meeting and your focus is on making the sale. You just learned your mother died and you've been working on a multi-million-dollar sale. You've got to go into that meeting. This is your one shot. You can't afford to go into grief and make that sale. So you put it somewhere. Where do you put it? Now, whatever the reason, when we dissociate consciously from the information in our heart, it often goes into the body, goes into anxiety, goes into exhaustion, goes into depression, frozen, anxious, fight, flight. It goes into the body. There's certain parts of our muscles that store that energy. And it stays there until we take it out again. So in this mapping process, which can take a month, go slowly, spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes every single day looking at every sensation in your body and really feel what it's like to be in your body. What are the feelings? What are the ages? How old does this feeling feel like? How heavy is this feeling? What is the feeling? Like I can go right into a deep sadness. So my body is still carrying a grief from 3 years ago when my heart was broken. What's the postures that your body wants to go into, because every posture that you're into will access a stored emotion. Is there joy and excitement that's being stored? Like there's 8-year-old excitement, reaching, curious, exploring. What are the emotions locked in your body? What muscles are carrying those emotions? What's the intensity? How heavy are they? And what do you need to do to integrate them, to be present for them? One of the great things that you can do is you can set your phone on a tripod, a little bit like I'm doing right here. You can use the portrait or the landscape mode, doesn't matter so much. But set it far enough back that you can see your body. And just spend 4 minutes. Now, if you haven't worked with your body much, 4 minutes is enough. Go into a single feeling. Find one by moving your body. You can either follow the feeling into the form, or you can move your body randomly. So this part doesn't want to breathe. So if I breathe, I can start feeling some of the freshness of a grief that's a bit overwhelming. And then this part doesn't want to be seen. So I can hide here and feel that I'm 4 years old. So you're mapping out what is there and what has been there. And you want to do this with great kindness, with great tenderness. These were waves of energy coming towards me that my culture that my ego did not prepare me to process and digest. And so my body is carrying these weights. It's holding these energies. You want to write it down. You want to go into the feeling. You want to write it down. You can draw a little drawing of what happens in different poses and what emotions are there. What's the age? What's the emotion? What's the event if you remember it? What's the intensity? You want to spend a month mapping this out. Because bringing your consciousness into your body is going to tell you where you are in your body. Because what your body does is it's a lens. It's like this lens here. Your body is the lens through which you see. Now, you can only see 50% of my face because the lens is rather thick. There's a lot of opaque density, and that opaqueness comes from residues in the past. There's something beautiful happening in the moment, but there's this heavy weight carried from the past. And I'm looking at this beautiful moment through the lens of this heavy weight. And I'm not fully in the present because I'm carrying this heavy weight. And I don't know what it is because I put it in the body, and then I told myself I don't want to look there again. You really want to understand trauma before you go into this, so I recommend studying and reading Healing Trauma, Peter Levine, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk, When the Body Says No, Gabor Mate, The Body Never Lies, Alice Miller, Iron John, if you're a man, a book about men, Marion Woodman, Exploring Dreams and Feminine Consciousness, if you're a woman. You want to explore this terrain so that your consciousness can relate to it in a healthy way. The destructivity of our time consists largely of attacking our bodies for holding the energy we put there, as if somehow this was the body's responsibility, when it's more like an overload system. If we will not consciously deal with what is at hand, the conscious tank overflows and the extra pours into the body, and it stays there as a toxic opacity until we clear it out of the body by consciously going back and releasing those charges, which means that we have got to feel that we're not going to die when we face those events and those feelings, which means that we've got to understand the landscape and the biology of trauma and how giant the world looks when we're young. We have to understand that, to have the humility and respect to go into this terrain with the kindness of a healer that can make something whole, that can make the body whole by giving back some of the messages, some of the energies, some of the emotions that we hold and that were given to us by the giant energies as an infant, as a child, upon which we depended for survival. Okay, so the next step in this process is diagnosis. And what diagnosis is cross-referencing all of the data points you've been gathering in order to get a sense within each polarity where the imbalance lies. So, for example, in the masculine and feminine polarity, where does that imbalance lie for you? And is it different in different areas? For example, giving and initiating are masculine expressions. Receiving and being approached is a feminine expression. So is there a balance, a symmetry within giving and receiving? Now, you want to lay out this information and make a list of all of the imbalances. So a business that creates and spends about the right amount of money, that takes hard work and also brings well-being, there might be a balance. You correlate different things, return on investment, masculine and feminine. You look at how much time is being spent in relationship, how much time is being spent on the goals, how much time is being spent in the past, how much time is being spent on the future, how much time is being spent on the present, how much money is being spent on the past, fixing debts, etc., how much money is being used to facilitate the present, how much money is being invested in the future. You look for natural wholenesses and then divide them into quadrants or triads or polarities, and you find the imbalance. Now, you do your own assessment, and that's the first step. The next step is to partner with another. And in this step, you find someone who cares about you, someone who has a willingness and a patience to see. And you ask them for their opinion. Now, it's important to look at the data yourself and to see what you found. And it's important to give voice to that. And then to hear the nuance, the additions, well, have you thought about this? And you want to find ideally 2, maybe even 3 people. Someone who is a little bit on the outside, the outcast, the shadow in your life, someone who you might not normally feel open to. That's one point. And then 2 different people. 2 different people that feel close to you, but that have different values, different focuses. And now you've got 4 sources of data. Your own assessment, the assessment of the enemy or the outsider, the assessment of perhaps someone who's more feminine, more focused on the immediacy, the feminine, and perhaps someone who's more masculine or just very different. You're looking for a diversity of perception, which is what gives depth perception. And as you summarize these, and you can do a diagram where you see where these overlap, you look for what you can learn. And what you want to do out of this is pick a singular focus that's most out of balance, that is causing the most dis-ease, the most distress. And you want to work to bring that back into alignment. To bring that back into alignment. So this is the task. This is the challenge for this step. And allowing a month in 5, 10 minute increments with yourself, maybe an hour, going over this with 3 different people. You can give a gift to the enemy. You're someone who I would normally put out there, but I'd like to give you a gift. I'd like to honor you. I'd like your input. You can write that all out and give them a card so they can think about it. Make an offering to the other, to the outsider, and perhaps partner in a growth triangle with the 2 that are in your circle. This will leave you with a diagnosis and a clarity of what to focus on, with the general principle being that you take whatever's leaning hard off to the left or hard off to the right, and the medicine is the behavior, the thoughts, the focus, the spending that's going to balance out that imbalance. The deepest wound that we deal with as human beings is the illusion of separation from the 99% of who and what we are. So we have this sense that this is me and stuff out there isn't me. And this is created by the zoom-in focus of the conscious ego mind. we've already, I think, looked at how little of us exists out of relationship with everything else, from the entire origin of the species giving rise to who we are, to the entire geography of the planet being a key part of who we are, to the environment. The color of our skin is related to what's going on outside, as well as the racial history pattern of our parents. The technology and wealth factor is largely to do with where we're born. So, everything about who we are is intimately and intricately connected with everything else. And yet we have this feeling and phenomena of separation. And it's healing that sense of separation that is the deepest healing that a human being can have. The deepest healing of loneliness. The sense of being alone and lonely forever, separate, unimportant, unwanted. So here's some of the ways to work with that. Well, the first is just a little bit of an exercise. And, that is to understand the mathematics of creation enough to understand the inextricability of the link. So you change the relationship between an electron and a proton, and you change. Your body does not exist in the way that it exists now. But so does the nature of matter in every part of the known universe also change. And so there's a very deep and intimate connection between who you and I are and the rest of reality. And so the construct that leaves us feeling disconnected and isolated from the vastness of what is the species, its probability field, all the other animals on the planet, what's happening over here and what's happening over here. The social codes that give rise to our pattern of relating also give rise to the pattern of relating elsewhere. The fractal pattern of the relationship with the inner personas expresses itself in the relationship between family members, expresses itself in the relationship between family and the larger community, expresses itself within the relationship with the larger power structures of government and of world politics, the relationships between countries, the East and the West, the dance between the masculine and the feminine. These things are inextricably connected, and it's important to heal that illusion of separation, to become mentally conscious and emotionally conscious of a love, of an empathy that transcends the limits of the human ego. Now, the next thing to do is just looking at the mathematics, we see that 99.999% of everything that exists is outside the egoic conscious mind. So the egoic conscious mind defines what's in here, and everything else is outside the egoic conscious mind. Most of us, we see a potato, we say, oh, that's a potato, it's not me. That's a chair, it's not me. That's a house, it's not me. That's that person, it's not me. And it is valuable to understand free will and its link to the egoic conscious mind. But it's also important to develop a relationship. If we understand that without oxygen we disappear, without food we disappear, without the atomic structure we disappear, without liquids we disappear, without culture we disappear. This cough emerges in the engagement with a cold room. The room is cold because this room is linked with the upstairs. And the thermostat is upstairs. And so the heat comes on, it rushes upstairs. This room is cold. The coldness of the room affects the throat. The throat, talking, affects other, the whole, it's connected. It's all connected. And yet we have this illusion that somehow I have a cold as kind of an isolated event. But there are no isolated events. We're dealing with probability fields. You and I are probabilities within the human probability field that emerge out of that probability field due to thousands and thousands of individual variables. And the amazing thing is that we are conscious and can partner with many of those variables. If I don't want to cough, and if I'm willing to wait 20 minutes to heat up this space and then come back, or by just engaging in this, I've just remembered there's a downstairs heater. This is Philip, by the way. There's a downstairs heater. So with a few taps of a button, because I don't run the main heater because it's too loud. So you hear the sound. And so you're a part of this. Meaning my empathy for your sound experience affects the temperature in my house in a way that if I had no empathy for you, I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't be in a cool room. And so, but then there's there's other variables. I have a space heater for that very reason, and I just forgot about it. So in healing this illusion of separation, the first thing is the mental understanding of that we are, in fact, very closely connected. Now, we make it hard to see those connections. And that's a pity, because we then feel a lot more isolated. We make it hard to see these connections. But it's one of the reasons that a very personal relationship with an archetypal construct that represents the whole, that represents the other, is a very important part of this step. And here's the way that I worked with it when I was 12, 13, spending some time at the Findhorn community in Scotland and trying to wrestle with, having been raised Christian, wrestling with what did I believe? And I'll walk you through the pathways that I took. And the first thing was a belief in the existence of everything. So as a probability field, and perhaps as an actuality, meaning there's the whole ranges of different densities, that everything exists. So is there some sadistic motherfucker off somewhere, trying to cause as much pain and havoc, otherwise known as the devil? No doubt. Is there a, sadistic motherfucker out there that busy hurting themselves and isn't worrying about anyone else? No doubt. Is there a transcendent, luminous being in waves of blue and transcendent light that feels joy in the healing and the beauty of every single human being that reaches out to it? No doubt. Is there a God called song that blossoms and comes into being every time we pray with a sound and a feeling of fullness, of love? No doubt. It's all out there. And if we understand, first of all, that it's all out there. Secondly, that it's much bigger than the human brain can acknowledge. So that's the next thing to look at, is that divinity, as in the deification, the crystallization of beauty, divinity. Plato said beauty, truth, and goodness were the triad of the ideal. And so if we seek the divine in what is beautiful, true, and good, is it out there? Yes, it is. It's out there. And then the question is, how far? As far as you can take it. And then the question is, well, how do I relate to it? And that's the tricky part. How do I relate to it? And so we need paradigms and concepts within time and space to relate to that which is transcendent. That which is transcendent of human thought, transcendent of human emotion, transcendent of anything that we're conscious of within space and time, transcendent of space and time. Transcend, to be outside the barrier. Within mathematics, there's a theory called set theory, and within the set theory, every paradigm is a set. So in the phone paradigm, this is the set. My hand goes off here. You don't see it anymore. It's not that the hand doesn't exist. It's just outside the set that is this camera. It's outside the box. It's still there. Many, 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 many things are outside the box. But what we're in right now is the box. And we're working within this box as we discuss transcendent ideas that are outside the box. Well, there's many, 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 many boxes. The box of language, the box of this camera, the box of this body, the box of this culture, the box of these paradigms, the box of a value hierarchy, the box of attention, the box of human consciousness, the box of time and space. There are so many boxes, and we're in all of them. And so when we transcend the box, we have to relate to that which is transcendent by what we know within the box. But set theory says we can't understand the set until we're outside the set. And when we're outside the set looking back, that's when we can start relating to reality. That's when we can start understanding reality fully. We have to be outside of the set and thus bigger than the set looking back. You have to be off of the planet and on the moon to really take a photo and get what a big deal it is. What a big deal it is to see this tiny little ball. It's when you're off or outside the set of the planet that you really start to grasp what a miracle it is. That after X billions of years, everything has, formed into just this kind of ecology that allows us to exist at this brief moment in time. Now, how do we relate to everything that's outside of us, which is 99.999999999%? Well, first of all, it is the humility to know that it exists. The humility to know that if you can imagine it, it exists somewhere. And the humility to know that while the imagination is infinite, meaning we could spend our entire lifetime imagining something different in every single moment from the next, and we still would not have explored the limits of our imagination. And then there's all that which is beyond what we can imagine. That's vastly bigger than that little speck of what a human being is capable of imagining. So how do we relate to all that? And the first thing to understand is to know that we don't directly. How we relate to it is symbolically. And this is the power of the symbolic ritual brain, the right brain. It is the power of the feminine. That we are relating to a vast amount of energy through the narrow doorway of a symbol that takes us to the edge of this reality, and then some. Now, how do we explore this terrain? We create our own symbol. And the symbol is our deity. The symbol is our deity. And our deity is the most beautiful, the most good, the most true thing that we can possibly imagine. You start with human beings. What's the crystallization? What's the crystallization of the human beings that you love, that you admire, that you respect? What's the beauty and the goodness and the truth? Who are your heroes, and what is heroic about those people to you? What's beautiful about them? Beautiful about their ideas, beautiful about their appearance, beautiful about their principles, beautiful about the way they move, the way they do things. What's beautiful to you in humanity? In living characters and in fictional characters. Figure in a play, a Shakespearean play, a drama, some aspect of Star Trek. It's beautiful. What's beautiful about human beings in fiction and in reality, or in physical dense form, for you? What's good? What does the peak of goodness look like to you? The peak of beauty, the peak of goodness, and truth. What is true? And of all the different truths, which truths are the most beautiful and good truths? You have this constellation. And is beauty, truth, and goodness the Platonic ideals? Are they yours? They were Plato's. Are they yours? And the deity has always been the projection, the creation in the future of a constellation of the most valued traits in the present. A few thousand years ago, God was all-knowing, all-powerful, all-seeing, all-doing. A few thousand years later, we've got Google at our fingertips. We've got machines that can do things, with, nuclear weapons. We have embodied over a 2,000-year period. We have become the gods that we dreamed about. In the Old Testament, God is a son of a bitch, filled with revenge and this, that, and the other, and prices and vindictiveness and obsession and jealousy. Sociopathic in many ways. We've become that too. But if you dream a beautiful dream for 2,000 years from now, what is God? We've become this God, but what is the symbol of all that is out there? What is that for you? And this is an opportunity of receiving a gift from the part of yourself that is beyond. And it's also a feeding to bless and invest in a symbol that is sacred because of what it represents, because of what it is a doorway to. A symbol that is powerful and empowering because of where it takes us, not because it is the be-all and end-all of the 99.999% that is beyond what we are capable of grasping within human imagination, but because it is the direction of the ideal, the pathway towards all of that. That's what makes it so valuable, so sacred, worth sacrificing to invest in. So your job for the next 2 months is to create a deity, to talk about and think about the qualities of the deity that can take you on the farthest journey, inside and out. If you like the paradigm of reincarnation, that over the next 2,000 to 3,000 years can take you places that you can only begin to dream of today, and to be touched and changed by those energies. The energies that you frame and worship with your thoughts, with your attention, with your love, with your belief, with your time, that you pray to in all of these different ways? Do you touch and dream with? Do you let touch you? These are the doorways. These are the doorways through which energy can interact with the interference pattern, the resonance pattern that is this body, this heart, this mind. In ways that are beyond what you can linearly track, transcendent moments. It has to be personal for it to be real. Just saying there's something out there that I can't imagine and it's more powerful than anything I can imagine and is something. That's all true. It's just you can't viscerally relate to it. We're in this little box called a body and called a mind, called a heart. We've got to, within this box, build a relationship with something that's outside the box. So it's got to be a symbol that has a name. You can call it God, Goddess, all that is. I like that one. You can call it multiple different, you can create, the Indians in India, they have so many different names for their gods and goddesses. There's a temple of rats where monks dedicate themselves to providing milk for the tens of thousands of rats that run throughout the temple constantly. Nobody seems to get sick despite walking barefoot in the temple of the rats. So what's sacred about that rat? How does something that we're afraid of or judge, etc., become sanctified and beautiful? How does that occur? That's your journey. It takes time. "20 minutes a day to meditate, to think, to talk with friends. Sit down in front of a camera like this and talk. What is a deity to you? To bow down. To understand that there is so much that is so much bigger than we are, and that we are a part of it. And that the fundamental laws out of which we emerge are the same laws out of which these deities emerge. That we are part of the field, the probability field, that touches all things. And the same laws that give rise to us can give rise to a deity. The same laws that give rise to a deity give rise to us. There's a connection, a mathematical equation. What is it? What is it? And what is it to you? All right, so we're here with Pip to discuss the sacred union, the sacred marriage, the relationship with the other. Now, it may be in this moment, it may be a little bit later, but the sacred marriage between the self and the other, between the masculine and the feminine, not the male and the female, the masculine and the feminine, that polarity that within any exchange, for example, there is a giving and a receiving. Otherwise, there's no exchange. You have two people giving and no one receiving, no exchange. Two people receiving and no one giving, no exchange. The polarity of the giver and the receiver coming together are equal parts of an exchange of energy. Two people talking, no one listening, no exchange. Two people listening, no one talking, no exchange. A speaker and a listener, the masculine and the feminine, you have an exchange of information. And we all have masculine and feminine inside. We all have a masculine side and a feminine side. And life exists in the dance between these two polarities. And you want to create that on the outside on an epic scale. There's nothing that can do that as beautifully and as well as a committed marriage, a committed relationship. There's nothing that can do that can amplify that journey as deeply. Now, the connection with the divine is the ultimate connection. And yet it needs a filter. It needs an interference pattern to play again that's within the sphere of our domain. We can taste and sense. And the lover, the committed and sacred lover, the transcendent lover, that is sacred because you sacrifice the illusion of separation for something bigger. It's a very big field. And so I'm going to refer you to one of my books, Co-Creating Conscious Chemistry. I'm going to refer you to happinessdata.org. I'm going and look through the projects. There's a 10x relationship map there. I'm going to refer you online to Co-Creating Conscious Chemistry, and there's a YouTube channel exploring some of these ideas. It's a very big topic. But just know that there is, when you find the right partner, now finding the right partner and exploring the journey there can be very interesting, can bring, vitality, presence, pleasure through sexuality. It's a very important thing to bring in as a dimension of reality. But it can also lead to pain, to trauma, to abuse. And so finding the relationship with our spiritual partner is the relationship that allows us to enact some of the transcendent principles of the relationship with other. Sacrifice. To make something sacred by honoring something bigger than ourselves. Now there's the sacrifice of martyrhood of, oh, woe is me, poor me. I had to take my wife into consideration and this and this and that, and this is all the, the drama of our ego identity. But when you make something sacred, when you explore that, and I invite you to explore this terrain over the next month, but also know that it's a good 2-year journey to learn the skills of mastering healthy and loving relationship. It's a 2-year journey to learn those skills. And cultivate. There's a good year in preparation, and then there's another year of realization, bringing and inviting someone into that sacred dance. It's a beautiful experience. It's a very beautiful experience. And it's sacred because you sacrifice what is small for something bigger. A good way to look at that is, when you're investing money for the future. When you create a future by giving something of the present so that the future can be even more beautiful, even more phenomenal than it would be if you didn't. A future that you step into. There's nothing martyred about being a multimillionaire because you put $100 a week away and grew those and grew a sense of abundance. There's nothing to be sorry for oneself about when you understand that link, that connection. It's about you growing, you dreaming into and leaning into the future, a more beautiful, true, and good future. And a future where magic blossoms, a future of grace. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And to co-create that with a partner is to enact one of the most sacred and divine rituals. To co-create that with a partner is beautiful. It's magical. Adds so much life and dimension, the probability field of everything that's beautiful, true, and goodness and good in our lives growing. Because of that love, because of that marriage, the third energy that is born out of any two people showing up in their innocence, the power of innocence. Innocence is like the stem cell of the soul. It can turn into anything. So beautiful. So I'll leave it at that, but it's a very, very exciting journey to give birth to.